and how that's going to affect, Rob, how that's going to affect what we're doing in that space now, and what the plan is as we go forward.
Yes, so we're aware of that. We anticipated it post the election as well, that the SNA mapping component was probably going to be pulled through central government change. So initially we did have budget within the LTP cycle to allow for that. But given the uncertainty there, we removed it, and we would have put it back through an annual plan process if it was going to be actually certain through the process. So at the moment it's been removed. Shouldn't affect the LTP at all. And we'll watch.
So it won't have any effect on BAU?
No, but we will be looking at more about monitoring biodiversity, actually finding out what's actually out there, what the changes in it. So actually being a bit more aware of what we've got.
Thank you.
Right.
Madam Chair, I was particularly interested in your comments about soil and section development, and I think it's an issue that specifically relates to my local ward, particularly Lincoln, and it's why it's happening is the desire to create TC1 sections. And so the topsoil stripped off, it's the underlaying composition is hammered down to create a geotechnically TC1 section, and then a drizzle of topsoil is put back on top. And unfortunately, the landowners come and put a nice house on top. When they try and establish a garden, it's almost impossible. And you see a lot of people in Lincoln who have plants either dying or gardening in pots. And the other effect it has, which affects the council, is that when it rains, the rain goes down, hits the compacted layer, and goes horizontally out to the road rather than soaking down the profile. So it's three things that concern the council, I guess, and it's particularly concerning in Lincoln. I don't know whether it's a work stream or whether it's just for advice, but certainly it's a problem in Lincoln.
Sam? I'm sorry, I'm not sure where you are on the
queue.
Yeah,
that's great. Thank you. My comments is just around the submission to the Government Policy Statement on Land Transport, which you've raised in your report, and just to note that staff have generated a draft report and have sought councillor feedback on that, and so if we can please have that back to Ryan. The timing of, again, trying to meet and to confirm a submission formally in a meeting and matching the government's timeframes don't quite line up. There's only a 4-week period for submissions here, and writing the submission takes a couple of weeks to confirm. So if you can get into that, I think there's a couple of key bits that I think we should support Ryan on. That is that the South Island is currently missing out on its fair share of transport investment, and so on particularly isn't seeing that. The need for public transport to be mentioned for Greater Christchurch. At the moment, that's only Auckland and Wellington. Christchurch is the second largest city in the country and doesn't have public transport listed as a priority within that currently. And our New Zealand Up projects also being confirmed through that process after years of working through the design. And with Waka Kotahi, we really need to see that in there. There's a couple of other things Ryan has highlighted around the need the needs to increase transport funding now rather than delaying the increases in RUC and petrol charges for 3 years. And the movement of money around is, while it's good for road maintenance, it doesn't actually help the other transport categories that we have valued and so on. And so our submission aligns with that. So there's a number of things that Ryan has put through. I just encourage everyone to have a look, and if you like it, great. If you have got some additions, then please let Ryan know. Thank you.
And thanks for raising that, Sam. I did have got a printout of it here, and I haven't had a chance to look at it, but Brian has done a really good submission if everyone can read it, and I totally agree with Sam's comments, and we definitely need to make sure that we're submitting on this because it seems to be quite a change from what was in the last GPS. The focus seems to have gone off having active transport and walking, cycling, and public transport. So, which doesn't help. One thing I forgot to mention was, remember that we were sending a letter about e-bike, I think rebate scheme or something supporting what Christchurch City had proposed and sent into government. So we have sent that in our one ourselves and haven't received a response. And I'm just thinking that maybe this needs to be re-looked at and see whether we want to approach that differently or park it or whatever. But this can be a discussion for another time. But just wanted to record that so we can come back to it later or another time. Sophie.
Yeah, thank you. So Sam's already talked about the government policy statement on land transport, so I won't do that one. But it is the fast track approvals bill is quite concerning because we know in this area what out of sequence developments can do to all your plans and strategies, and I'm quite concerned that in the mysterious 100-odd projects that they're just going to add into an appendix and approve immediately, that there might be some more subdivisions or something like that for Selwyn that have previously been declined, but somebody feels that will let them go ahead without any other connections into the local policy. So yeah, I just wanted to mention that because it's a real concern for me, and I know we're probably going to submit on it, but that's a real danger with this bill. But the other thing was I'm actually quite concerned with your response about Andrew Hoggett's comment in the media, because he withdrew that the day later, saying that councils should continue as normal because we haven't actually changed the law yet. So please ensure that you continue doing the work. I get that it's still a signal that they want to change the rules around SNAs, but they haven't actually done that yet. And it's a bit of a legal question that he's been told to withdraw.
Yeah, so council has until I think 2027 to comply with NPSIB. It'd be looking at upwards of a $3 million project for council to carry out that mapping project. So given the short-term uncertainty around what's actually happening in that space, once central government actually becomes out, actually this is what we're going to be doing with it, then would be launching from there. But to start committing $3 million now, just for the SNA framework to change, the definitions could change, what we need to do with them could change. It can mean all that mapping work that we would have done and all that funding we've committed could be for nothing.
Elizabeth?
Thank you again for a very good chair report. I really love that you've put lots of links and things that we can attend or look through. I just putting a plug in for the Envirotown Kim Hill topic of plastic. I've been to a few of the Kim Hill topics. Really well done, absolutely brilliant. And I hopefully we'll see a lot of councillors there, because I feel that this is probably our biggest waste stream next to tyres. That we can identify and do something with, that we're not. We can't just keep burying plastic at the level we are in landfill forever.
Thanks for Elizabeth. And yeah, I'm hoping that other councillors go to that as well. There's some of us who are regulars goers to it, and some of us are regular MCs, eh, Malcolm? And Sam has done it as well. Lydia.
I just wanted to, it's not necessarily on your report, but it's around our actions table, and we had discussion around tree replanting policy from April last year. And I remember bringing up around tree canopy cover and shade, and just note that hasn't been addressed yet, even though we've had on the 25th of October, an update around vegetation and tree management policy.
Thanks for that. That was something that I had intended to bring up as well, but I've forgotten about. So the question I wanted to raise was whether that report that was presented to us has now, there is a feeling that that is the work stream finished that we're asking about, but I think that there is actually more to be done of what, I mean, it goes back to where I did in my inaugural report to this meeting, was saying about canopy cover, because Christchurch City Council had been looking at theirs, and I was wondering, it would be good for us to know what ours sits at and what our plans are going forward for that. It was nice to have the information in that last report about we've got the whole tree things are sitting in different departments, whether it's the reserves area or looking at biodiversity and such like. But it is something we need to look at. As I said, we are our land, we are heating up. It's getting hotter. Having trees actually helps our urban scape, and we are getting a lot of trees that are being cut down. And that was another thing that I requested, was whether there was some way that we had around trying to be able to keep more of the trees that were, as opposed to being cut down. If you remember, is it Sienna Fitzjohn came and spoke to us about that, about her concern about that, and she spoke very well, and particularly about a large tree, using that descriptor. And I think, I mean, made me think, and I hope it made everyone else think about trees. It's really hard and takes much time to grow large trees, and to see them just get felled willy-nilly is not good. Sorry, that's my rant. But anyway, Megan.
Yeah, kia ora. My button goes on, off, because of course I'm going to talk about the same topic my colleagues have talked about, which is the Indigenous biodiversity. And this is different than the strategy that we're about to do. So the statements by the Minister, to my understanding, is there will be an intention to change the NPS-IB, and in that it will be focused on where there's SNAs that are on private property, because this government's direction is to protect private property rights. And so when it comes to changing the NPS-IB, it would be good from my perspective to signal now that Mana Whenua will be submitting to continue to have identify SNA across all of the district, and it would be worthwhile us as a council also thinking about submitting on the same. It was a statement rather than question.
No, thank you, Megan. We need to hear that. I've just taken a little note of that as well. Shane.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kei te puritanga e te kaihoi e te waka, tēnā koe, tēnā tātou. Just a big win for the environment, as tyres were mentioned. The amendment to the Tyre Waste Minimisation Act is now in place, where the cost of disposal will be now front-loaded, which means your tyres will cost more, but ensures that illegal disposal will now no longer happen. So, yep, to your point, I just wanted to also pass that has come to pass, and good win for the Te Taia. Kia ora.
Sam?
Yeah, I'm just following up on what you and Lydia raised, actually. What is the answer to that, and where is that work progress?
That's why I'm just writing some notes to myself now, which I was going to just bring up, whether we can put on a work stream, because also Grant brought up. So, speaking of what I was saying about the soil thing, and whether we looked at that as well, just wondering if we can put those plus the e-bike letter in it, if it's possible for us to have something to come back to us on those items.
I think it would assist staff if you could be very specific on the request.
Yes. So just to give a heads up that those items, and if there's any others that people can think of, so that was the valuing soil one, and looking at the soil, what's happening in our district, and what things we can do if there is the soils getting taken away and reusing it, things we can look in that regard. The tree canopy one, and it's good, Lydia, you brought that up, but that's still not been totally resolved to our satisfaction. And I've also added about the e-bike thing to relook at that, where we go with that with this current government, because we haven't had a response. So if we want to keep going down this line, the situation's different, and there'd be different people to deal with if we wanted to continue with that. Sam?
I think, yeah, for the tree canopy piece, for me, that's saying, how do we have a policy that means all new development has X number of street trees within? and what process might we need to go through to bring up to scratch the rest of the streets within our district over a particular period of time, and what would that cost? And yeah, give us some options around how we would do that.
Yeah, and we also need to know actually what we've got at the moment as our percentage tree cover as well. Lydia?
Yeah, just to touch on that a little bit further and from the different angle, I hear from a lot of people around our reserves and having enough shade in our reserves. And so that's where I thought tree canopy cover could actually come into it. So what percentage of canopy cover might we have in our reserves?
Yep, it comes into that as well, but there's also, if there's specific shade for like playgrounds and stuff, that the actual shade sales and such like be a better one thing to look at. But that generally, though, can be a wider piece because it links in. Pardon? And that comes under the transport and infrastructure side as opposed to this one, which is another crossover. Okay, so nothing more on that. We'll move on to the next agenda item, and I don't know what that is because it's your report. Very good, because I don't have the.
Thank you. The consents
Computer
team and
logged in.
Murray, if you. Yep. So a matter that's not been addressed in my executive director's report, which has just come to light post the publishing of that, is just our resource consent statutory timeframe compliance. So let's get the team to come up, and should be a slide pack on there somewhere.
Thank you. That was.
Tina. Get the-
Sorry, chat. Did we need to move your report?
Yes, Sophie. Thank you for that. Can I have? I don't have my little list to go down, and my computer shut down. Can I have a move? Oh no, I'll move my report. Do you want to second it? And everyone in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you.
Cool. And Murray, if you could control it for me, please. Fantastic. Thanks. So just getting to the context of the next slide there. So there is a RMA requirement to process non-notified consents within 20 working days. Given that we're working under 2 district plans at the moment, we have extended those timeframes out to 40 working days. So while our January compliance was high at 97%, we have dipped during the February month down to 77%. And just to note, there is a provision in the Act that requires refunds of up to 1% per day, up to a maximum of 50%. So a bit about the why. So that's the next slide, please, Murray. So we've got 2 district plans at the moment. So a lot of increased complexity there, increased workloads, a lot of interpretation issues with dealing with new plans. There's also general capacity issues across development engineers and resource consents. And also consent numbers remain high. And as the years have gone by, the nature of those consents have actually grown in complexity. So while the numbers have been about the same the last 2 or 3 years, the nature of those consents are a lot more meaty, a lot more time needs to go into actually processing them. There was a bit of a lull in numbers in September of last year while people waited for the new district plan to become operative. And once that became operative, we received quite a big glut of consents in November and December, which is the big the glut that we're working through at the moment. So some of the actions that we're taking to try resolve this issue. So we're resolving district plan appeals, and eventually we'll be working towards 1 district plan. So this will occur over this year as mediation occurs. I think we've gone through 4 of our 24 appeal points already. We're working towards improving our digital systems to allow actual live tracking of our consent numbers rather than manual data handling at the end of a month. We're looking at increasing capacity, so we're bringing on 4 additional external consent consultants on top of the 2 existing externals we have. We have an external consent decision maker to help free up our team leaders to help guide those decisions. We have 1 additional external development engineer consultant coming on board, and we also have 1 additional development engineer FTE being sought through their long-term plan. And we're further investigating bringing on more development engineers as well. Just to note with those external consultants, they are 100% chargeable back to the consent applicant. So there is no cost on the council there, but there is a bit of an extra administrative burden on internal staff. So looking into sort of outcomes, it will be dependent on consent applications for the next month or two, how fast we can get back to where we need to be. There is a bit of a time lag as those consent applications move through for the next couple of months. But with those actions I've sort of gone through, I would expect us to be back in that 90% range, May and June. So I guess over the last 3 months, we've been above 90%, with January being 97%. So as an organisation, we are capable of operating at a high level. So with those changes and solutions, I expect us to get back there reasonably soon. I guess any questions on that before we get into the body of my report?
So,
Yeah.
Sharon.
Thank you, and thanks, Bob. I think is it also just important to include as part of the district plan that for the engineering department, there's been some changes around requirements around flood that didn't exist before, which may help explain why there's a scheduling or timing challenge, or were you going to cover that off next?
Yeah, I can cover that now. So the flood assessment certificates, which were never part of the district plan as notified and as agreed by this council, but was entered into the district plan through the process by commissioners and submission. So it's meant that there's effectively an unbudgeted for work requirement on consent building and the development engineers as well. So the capacity never existed to actually facilitate that process to happen. So we are trying to rectify that with extra resources, but it does take a little time to bring that on.
Deborah? Oh, sorry, Shane.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Rob, the improving capacity of 4 additional external consultants, is that due to capacity and or skills internally, and understanding that those costs will be passed on? Is it a feasible long-term solution?
Yes, so it's just a pure numbers thing internally. We just don't have the capacity to deal with the consent numbers that we have. Those fees are charged onto the applicant.
Yes.
Long term, that's something we can look about actually. Is there enough work there? Do we need to bring FTE into council? But in saying that, we only really are about 60% in-house chargeable because there's administrative time and stuff like that.
Thank you.
Deborah.
Thank you, and thanks for the report. Just with regards to the 1%, that's per day, that has to be refunded back to the applicant for non-processing. Have we budgeted for that, or is that a substantial amount of money given our processing percentage?
I don't think it's budgeted for. Emma can correct me of that. So for that February month, we're looking at about a $17,000 discount or refund.
Grant?
While I don't profess to be a planning expert, I think Bob would acknowledge that I've probably had more reason to write to him in the recent year than I have in the last 3 years, or probably even 5 years. But so what it tells me, I suppose, is there's a degree of frustration out there in the community, and they are contacting us as governors. Not so much probably the ones that you're doing BAU, which we're getting in that 77% or 97%, but probably using the terminology of the Christchurch City Council, the dirty 30s, the ones that have been there long, 2-3 years, and they're difficult ones. I just wonder whether we shouldn't, ring fence some resource to actually get those to a situation where they get off the books, because I imagine they're taking an exorbitant amount of resource. And the feedback from the community is they feel that the council, through the imposition of new or things that weren't in the district plan for the commissioners, is moving the goalposts when they are 3/4 or 9/10 of the way through the process. And B, the accusation, hopefully ill-founded, is that RFIs are being used as a method to provide more window for the length of time to do the application. So I'm not making those accusations for myself, but that's the feedback from the community, Rob.
Sharon?
Thanks, Grant. And actually, that feeds into what I was just going to ask Bob. One of the things that Bob and I have been discussing is about our customer service approach, and how we engage with those that, there are challenges. So I think part of one of the remediation in our actions is taking that slightly more personalised approach, but obviously we've got to think how we do that within terms of the current constraints that we have around personnel. But certainly the intent is to, well, Bob, do you want to talk to that a little bit more rather than me?
Yeah, still. So it's around identifying strategic partners and being a bit more enabling around those. So effectively, you may have a Ryman Healthcare, which brings $200 million worth of economic development to the thing, and then versus a resource consent, which is a single lot subdivision or something like that. And being a bit more purposeful about where we apply our resources in order to give the greater bang for buck on that type of thing.
But also that's at a strategic level, but in terms of just generally our, I guess we've had conversations about a case management style approach where needed, where we have to for particularly challenging cases. And it's about how I support Bob and the team to see what other alternatives we've got.
Thanks for that. So no more questions. I have someone to move that report.
I'll get into the body of it now.
You want more? Okay. Okay. No.
Sorry to occupy more of your time. So getting into the actual written report. So it covers a couple of things. So resource management reform. So as you're aware, the Natural Built Environment Act and the Regional Spatial Planning Act has been repealed. So the RMA will be staying with us for a time being, be subject to amendment in the short term and potential repeal in the long term. Sort of already talked about the fast tracking bill that's been introduced. So we are preparing a submission on that. So it largely covers projects of national and regional significance, although there's not a lot of definition on what actually that means. And that goes straight to the Minister for decision with very little ability to actually appeal that. On the medium density residential standards, so government has indicated that where councils have sufficient or significant amount of capacity, which is upwards of 30 years of housing supply, that they may allow those medium density standards to be optional. They haven't actually released any details or the mechanism what that change actually looks like. So our supply almost meets a projected 30-year demand. So if we do have the ability to amend our medium density zones, we would be looking to retract those to sort of the core town areas and along key PT networks. MPS HPL, so changes have been indicated for this statement, although no detail has been released to date either, but we would be assuming that the provisions would be more enabling of greenfield subdivision because of that. Looking at city deals, so government's also indicated that it wishes to enter into sort of region or city deals with territorial authorities and other parties and partners. Again, no details have been released on what that actually looks like and the mechanism for entering into those. International examples of city deals have usually involved a substantial amount of central government funding to pay for those, but as indicated by the Minister already, this scenario will be a bit different. It won't be a case of a vehicle for handouts for councils. At the 1st of May briefing, we will be having a presentation by Patrick McVeigh, who's a bit of an expert in city deals, to be able to provide a bit more context for you. And on the 1st of May. Also at that 1st of May briefing, we'll be bringing a paper covering some potential options from what our city deal could look like for Selwyn, and they'll be largely linked with the actions and the strategy of the economic development strategy. Lastly, district plan appeals. So the timeline has been included in my report. That's probably changed slightly since it was published. So for the provision-based appeals, these will largely be settled via mediation and reported back to council. For the large rezone-based appeals, some of those will be settled via mediation and brought back to council for a decision, but some will also go to environment court hearing as well. And as each appeal is settled, we'll be updating our new plan and removing provisions from the old plan to make it a lot more simple. Questions?
Sophie,
Oh, Sam was first.
it's hard to know with Sam.
I know the
Jump in the
microphone
queue.
jumps. I was first this time.
You were first. Okay, Sam.
Firstly, the MDRS stuff. I just wonder what decision-making and leadership we want from this governance group around whether we would change anything or not. Because it feels to me like there was, when the change came in, it was, in many ways, it saved us a really hard piece of work and having to talk to our community about the changes we'd seen in lots of other places. And there was the ability to make it happen because the government had asked it to happen. That has led to some places, I think particularly in Rolleston, being zoned for medium density that are outside, well, actually all of Rolleston is kind of outside public transport routes for getting around Rolleston. But if we were to change that, to me, that would be quite a big decision because actually most of that won't be enacted anytime soon anyway because of the type and typology of housing that we've got and the covenants that currently sit on sections basically restricting land use to only single story dwellings on a time limited basis and some for a little bit longer. And so for us to pull back the ability to build 3 stories to only having single dwellings means that we're just buying a really hard conversation in another 15 or 20 or 30 years time for a future council. And I'm just not sure that's the right route to go. So I'm interested in what processes we would put in place around that discussion before we would even enter into opening it back up. I quite like where we are now. And on the city and regional deals piece, the government has been quite clear in meeting with both the Minister for Local Government and the Prime Minister on this, that they are not in a place right now to think about what regional deals need to be actioned. What they would like to do is understand what the frameworks regional and city deals should take, and then want to use the second 6 months of this year to come up with that framework discussion and have a good understanding of the framework piece before any city or region has anything signed up. And so that some councils across the country had thought that they wanted to be in on the 1st of December last year with their deal, and the government's been quite clear on that. So, Rob, thanks for bringing this work to us and thinking about how we advocate for the Selwyn parts of that deal, and also recognising that some things might need to happen outside Selwyn that will still be good for Selwyn. And so we need to think about what's the regional deal piece where we benefit, even though it might not be located here in our district. I wouldn't mind just your thoughts on the MDRS.
Yeah, definitely. So we'll be waiting on central government to say what that actually looks like and the mechanism for it. And then we'll definitely bring that back to council for briefing, workshop, and then a council meeting to actually understand what that is. So it definitely will be brought back to council. And if it is a case of we just leave it as is, then we'll be leaving it as is. But there'll be multiple of options that we're providing, and we'll workshop that.
Sophie?
Yeah, so I got a couple of things. The first one, sorry to be pernickety as usual. Item 4, you've got on the 21st of December 2024, council lodged an appeal. So apparently I presume that should have been 23, just for accuracy in the record. Secondly, want to support what Sam was saying there, in the sense that without MDRS across our townships, we would basically be relegating Rolleston and Lincoln and Prebbleton to being a bit more of a backwater for another 10, 20 years. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love our townships and everything else, but if we want things like public transport, if our people who love to ask for more facilities or more shops and this, that and the other, that's not going to happen unless we get denser. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see what the government signals and how much leeway there is to actually do what we're being asked to do, as opposed to just following the line and building on more greenfield sites, which is not the answer either. But on that particular matter was the main one I was going to say was, so the consultations that were mentioned previously around things like the GPS, and then there's other issues like we know have been happening with school builds and everything and being put on pause. Ellesmere College, again, not getting rebuilt. Lincoln still needing another building. Rolleston needing a whole campus. And I'm hearing some quite worrying things from our growing primary schools as well. We have accepted plan changes for several subdivisions that have in their decisions from the commissioners and presumably also with the proposed district plan, information has been given from the Ministry of Education and has been assumed on behalf of ECAN in terms of provision of public transport. There have been plans put in place for improving the road safety of intersections and various things to enable increasing amounts of transport, cars and vehicles to go through. And several of those things are literally under threat right now. And yet we have agreed that these houses will be built without, there were plenty of people who said that even originally the infrastructure wasn't set up to take these extra several thousand houses. But we agreed to those plan changes based on, okay, there is a work plan that will bring it up to scratch, and everything's going to be fine. If those things aren't going to happen, what recourse is my question? What can we do? Because otherwise, we're just allowing and creating and enabling a bigger problem for us and for anybody who moves into those houses. They won't be able to have space for their kids to go to school. The road safety will be down, and the greenhouse gas emissions will be through the roof, because the only way to get to Christchurch or other places, even from one end of town to another, is going to be by car. And I don't think that's a good enough future for our community, frankly.
Thank you for that. Sophie, did you want to respond to that? No. Or it's something that you can look.
If there's
something
anything that you can, I'm not saying give me an answer right now, but it'd be really interesting to know at some point, where do we sit with this when we've committed to something and our partners have gone, nah.
Yeah, it's a difficult one, as you've sort of described. So through that plan change process, the resource management process doesn't allow for the provision of education or health. It's not a relevant concern. Effectively, the houses will come and the Ministry of Education need to provide. When we had those applications lodged for all those rezones, we were communicating with the Ministry about where these are going and how many people are going there to let them to forward plan as best they could. What they do after that point, there's very little we can actually do other than exert, I guess, political influence from your governments.
And this is where we left with the likes of Rolleston College and stuff like that. But anyway, good points raised, and it'll be something that we should hopefully look into further.
Possibly to include in it as well in like the fast track consenting and the GPS submissions.
Yep, very good point. Elizabeth.
Hi, Rob. I just wanted to, while I remember it first up, say that I had heard, I can't guarantee this for sure, but I'd heard that Lincoln and Leeston were going ahead with the builds. So at least we've got two schools in the district that are still charging on ahead. There's more to say on that, but I won't. And we're just talking about going for the medium density. Nothing's changed. It's still down to the property developers who make the decision, correct? And this is where those who I know are in that industry are saying that there's not the market and demand for it. Primarily, what do we attract in our areas? We seem to attract families primarily, and families are not looking for medium density housing per se. I'm sure that there would be a need for some, but ultimately they're looking at selling it at the end of the day and making their money out of it, and that's what I'm hearing from them. So have you got any of those builds in the pipeline? Is there anything consented to have medium density started within our district?
Actual consents, I can tell you off the top of my head. There is Emma still around, she might be more aware of that, but generally our economic advice is in the short to medium term, we don't expect much uptake at all. And also with all the property developers in the new sections are heavily covenanted as well to prevent this type of development. So if we do have any development through our consents processes, it'll be very, very little.
There has obviously been appears to be quite a bit of a take up in Christchurch City itself in regards to that medium density. So it will be interesting to see where it goes from there.
Emma, did you have anything to add on that one?
Yeah, sorry, I don't have a number, but we are dealing with multi-unit developments in MRZ on the daily, so we can try and quantify that because it'd be quite useful for us as well.
So just the acronyms, MRZ.
Sorry, we are dealing, so multi-unit development, more than one dwelling on a site in the medium density residential zone. So all the areas of Lincoln, Rolleston, Prebbleton that would rezone to take the greater density of development. Yeah, so we are dealing with both just land use, so people wanting to erect more than one dwelling on a site and just keep it like that, and also the subdivision of those dwellings once they're built. So we're dealing with lots of issues, testing those new rules in the district plan.
Thanks for that. Be interesting to yeah, if we can have more details about that. It's a good question Elizabeth's asked, and so if we can have more detail, it would be good for us to know what was actually happening in that regard.
Yeah, no, we'll see what we can do.
Thank you. Megan.
Yeah, kia ora. Interesting times, but nothing that we haven't seen before. In my day job as a commissioner, we are told, do this. This is the new MPS. Now don't, and do this instead. And it's the opposite. And so council's facing exactly the same challenge. And I do support the comments that we need to decide how we want to respond to our communities. And of course, we need to follow central government instruction, if it is an instruction, through changes in legislation, but not comments and rhetoric in the media. Yep. But my question around that is, as we look to the medium density standards and how we're actually going to respond, we adopted the spatial plan last week. We adopted it, didn't we?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so my question is, how does, in terms of timeframes of things, what are we doing to take the next step to implement the spatial plan? And does the rhetoric in central government in this direction change the timeframes around adopting the spatial plan? And would it come back to the discussion that we're going to have that you said once we get some direction from central government, we'll need to take the spatial plan into account?
Yeah, all good, very good question. So with the Greater Christchurch Spatial Plan, there's, I guess, two elements of how we give effect to it. So there's a whole lot of priority development areas as part of that. And the next phase for the partnership would be to say, right, here's the 16, these are our priorities, and they'll be working through those. Aside to that, we'll be doing our own spatial planning for future Selwyn, which we'll be trying to align with that as well. So we can keep the medium density as far as we can, or we can choose to focus it into those core areas that makes infrastructure provision a lot easier and really target those PT corridors. Or we can even go higher if we wanted to. So the central government direction, or what they've indicated the direction to be, is that it'll be an optional thing, so we can still retain it if we wanted to.
Thank you. Helpful also to link it into future Selwyn. Thank you.
Thanks, Megan. Deborah.
Thanks for some very good questions around medium density. Look, I note that we have a councillor briefing on urban design for medium density after this meeting, and they're just guidelines. My question would be, preempting the discussion, are we implementing these guidelines, or is that going to be a question that we will discuss later and then bring it back as some sort of recommendation? Because it's okay having medium density, but you've also got to have the green space, and I think that came through the Greater Christchurch Planning Partnership, where you've got to have your blue corridors and your green corridors as well to compensate for healthy livings, healthy streets. So there's a big picture story evolving here. And it also crosses over into our infrastructure planning, and the report that Nicole's just brought was density of soils and the runoff and the lateral runoff and where that all ends. And we do have Te Waihora at the bottom of our catchment. So while we're looking at these in little bits and trying to bite off little bits, is there any way that through our future Selwyn vision that we can actually link all of these together somehow for the reality of what we're looking at for, you know, for the future. And that's my question, because that's the nuts and bolts of where we have to go with healthy living. So
Cover the first question. So they are just guidelines. So we can't have mandatory implementation of them. So they're the guidelines that if someone's doing a type of development, this is what we'd like to see, and provide that advice to them so they can shape their development to what we'd like. The medium density residential standards are very prescriptive. We can't go beyond what they are, but we can try influence where we can, and that's where the design guidelines come into it. And on the future selling side of things, so it's sort of leading off from Megan's question around the spatial planning that we'll be doing. So our area plans and our town structure plans, that's where we're looking at where is the appropriate density for the right location, and how does that align with the amenities and schools and public transport and parks and that type of thing. So that's where we'll be looking at that in a lot more detail.
Thank you. Grant?
It's a really good table around the mediation dates and times. Is there a place that I can go to and a similar effect, a one-pager, which tells me the issues that they are seeking to undergo mediation on? So that obviously we're not involved in mediation, but it'd be good for us to understand where are the pinch points that they're appealing on. Is there a one-pager somewhere I can go to?
So Rachel behind you is our policy team leader, so she'll be able to answer that a lot better than I, but I'm pretty sure there's all the content on our webpage which details all that.
Is there a microphone? What? No.
As we did with the district plan submission points, where we had summed up the database with all of the submission points requesting changes to the plan, we've done the same thing with the appeal points. So we've been through all of the appeals and filtered out or figured out which bits of the plan are subject to which bits of which appeals. So it's all there on the website, so you can filter for subject or for provision or for appellant. All of that's there.
I was hoping I'd just go to the date and have a cross-reference link or something. I could just go to it. So there's, but it's more of a, I have to go and manually filter through still. Yeah. It's okay. I just
In terms of the whole 20-something appeals,
well,
or
yeah, there's a whole lot of things that I'm particularly interested in looking at, including Indigenous biodiversity and all those sort of things that I'd like to understand the submission, the mediation point. So it's just a matter of going in there and putting Indigenous biodiversity in for and I'll get to the right mediation point on our website, not the intranet.
no, on council's website, so it's publicly available to all of the community.
Thank you.
Is that all, Grant?
Thank you.
Cool. So no more questions. I don't think I asked for a mover and a seconder. So we're going to have a mover for that report. Malcolm, a seconder. Sam. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Greater Christchurch Partnership Joint or Housing Action Plan. Oh, it's Ben. Hello.
They can dance.
Oh, yeah. No dance today.
I regret that. More than that.
We're waiting.
Oh, do you?
No, your report.
Oh, yes. Yeah, so a couple of weeks ago, Lucy came and gave a great summary of the Housing Action Plan in her usual effervescent, optimistic way. So I'll follow up with the kind of an opposite approach, maybe. Yeah, so that Housing Action Plan is looking at kind of addressing affordability, kind of the right typologies, the right places, some of the key issues facing the social and affordable and density issues for the sub-region. So that's the Housing Action Plan is a set of actions that we're agreeing to explore collectively. It's things that have a regional focus. So yeah, things that we can't solve on our own, we need to work together on them. So that stuff's in our work program here. And so the agreement here is to commit to doing that work. It's not agreeing to any of the things within that, any of the actions and the decisions associated that will have to come back to here to get sorted out. So it's just, yes, we're doing the work. Champion us and stuff like that.
Thank you. Sophie.
Yeah, as a member of the working group on the governance side for this, I would like to move it, please.
Very good.
But also note that in our agenda, it says Appendix 1 contains a copy of the Housing Action Plan. It's not actually in the agenda, so I'm not sure if it's in the one that's on the website, but I do think it's important for it to be in here for the record as well. Thanks.
Very good point. And while we're talking about movers and seconders, can I have a seconder for that, for the report? Lydia? Thank you. Megan?
Kia ora. It's quite rare that mana whenua decide to engage on a plan with government agencies. But this plan, mana whenua have actually been actively involved in, and we've put our own quite a bit of time and resource into this. And there's two reasons why. And I'm not going to repeat what I said when Lucy was here, but in a nutshell, one, we are overrepresented in all of the negative housing statistics. We're not living in healthy homes. Some of us aren't living in homes, and our homes are overpopulated. That's one end of the spectrum, and yet we are property developers. We create subdivisions in this district. So there's something going wrong when we are a property developer and making commercial returns, and yet overrepresented in the negative statistics. So the Joint Housing Action Plan is a way to enable that, and it talks about enabling papakainga in the urban environment. And for that reason, I just wanted to say mana whenua have been actively part of this and appreciate it and support it, and then offer my support. So kia ora.
Oh, thanks, Megan. Grant?
By adopting this report, there's only one issue that I'm concerned about, and that's on page 38, number 5, investigate expanding CCC's development contribution rebates. When you give someone a rebate, it means that someone else is paying, which in this case would mean the rest of the ratepayers are selling. So as long as it's only investigating and doesn't commit us to actually doing that without a further debate around the reasons why we might do that, I would support it. But if it's saying by implementing this, we're actually holus bolus going into DC rebates, I don't support it.
Can you respond to that?
I think, just as has been mentioned before, it very much commits us to work through these actions and what they actually look like for us, without actually committing us to the final decision, I guess, the implementation of them. Yeah.
Deborah?
Thank you. I've just got one query, and it's on the 1 to 8 action. And I guess it's enlightened when I was on the working party for looking at affordable housing for Scowen and being shown around Kaingora various developments. And they did a very good synopsis of what worked and what didn't work. And I just want to know, have they, because they are mentioned as a partner and not being involved in this, have they actually shared that information with the rest of the committee? Because that is so very, very important to understand what does work, what doesn't work, and to put some sort of policy initiatives around it so we do get healthy homes, we do get sustainable living.
The answer to that is yes.
We'll be working with Kaingora and other providers to figure out the issues they're facing and what things we can do to help that. Yeah.
Elizabeth?
Ben, what exactly is affordable housing? Do we have concrete information on what quantifies something as affordable, and it's affordable to who and how?
Yeah, probably haven't defined it in this, but it's generally working on a 30% income to support the home. So it's at that level. But it's usually working on the housing continuum that we're looking at as a scale. You can look at people that need a home that can't pay for it. That's like the social housing one. Affordable is, you can't afford to get into private ownership yourself. You need some way to get into that space. So it's helping at that end of the spectrum to figure out ways to make house prices easier, I guess. And then there may be actions around how do we ensure people can get access to loans and things like that as well. But affordability is not essentially defined, but we may have to probably define that here. Yeah.
Shane?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Ben. I'm guessing the 30% ratio that you're using is page 38B, where it uses the Melbourne estimate that $1 invested in affordable housing returns 3. Is that kind of what you're working off? And would that be a Selwyn example? Or?
I think it's about what it generates. I think the affordability is whether you're using 30% of your income to pay for your home costs.
Yes.
Sometimes you use 30, sometimes you use 40. Previous governments had a set figure to use, like a dollar amount. So people have defined it in different ways, but generally 30% is a kind of worldwide standard. But yeah.
I'm just seconding, Madam Chair. I'm happy to support Grant's raised a question there. Would you consider the GCP to be a good vehicle for government to consider future cities? Is that kind of the thinking around that, the alignment of Future Cell and GCP, and an opportunity to be a cab off the rank, essentially?
Maybe mixing a few different things there, but the housing action plan here is to try and figure out those issues that across our region. So we don't want to be trying to attempt one thing here where have a perverse outcome and leading to something happening in Christchurch or Waimakariri. So we want to be able to do it collectively so that we're all doing it as a unison.
Yeah.
Were you meaning about the city deals, which Sam talked about before?
Yeah. That's why I left it to now, because a GCP, in my opinion, would be a great example of leading the way for a future city deal. The return of GST, which in fact could be another revenue stream to complement the council. Thank you.
Okay, Sophie, again.
Yeah, I just wanted to say the mention of $3 return, that's more of a return on investment. So if you invest in in housing, particularly affordable housing at that end of the spectrum, you get a return on investment in terms of people being able to afford food, energy, education, transport, all of those other things, which then in turn uplifts a lot of other well-being indicators. But as Ben has pointed out, this isn't so much a roadmap as an action plan that leads to the roadmap and what it looks like, so that we're all working together, rather than trying to do this work in separate little silos, which would be very inefficient basically. And it's not just about one particular style of affordable housing, because different family types need different housing in different places with different access to transport or education, everything else. So it's trying to just work together and identify a few things that we can do as a whole, so that whenever any particular targets are identified and ways and means to do it, we're all using fairly similar values and measures and methods, rather than asking a developer to do it differently, one way in Selwyn, one way in Waimakariri, and one way somewhere in Christchurch, which is not helpful for anybody. So this is just kicking it off. Yeah. And it's
is that what are you correcting me on something?
No, it's just there's a few questions around what is affordable. There's no one definition of affordable. And in terms of the affordability, that wasn't so much correcting you around the $3 thing. That was because that mention is on a return on investment as opposed to a measure of affordability. As Ben mentioned, affordability varies if a government chooses to put a stick in a sand for that one. Yeah. I will be quiet now.
Okay, anyone else wants to say anything? So we've had a mover and seconder, so everyone's all in favour. Say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. So now we're on to our closing karakia, and everyone can join in. The point. So only here, tapo, tapo, kiwatia, kiwatia, ai, kiwatia. Thank you for the meeting. So we will be going into councillor briefing, but it's a good opportunity to have a break. So say come back in about 20 minutes and we can start on the briefing. Thank you. It's the end of the meeting.